بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. Alhamdulillah, welcome back to another lesson of Al-Ajurrūmiyyah. Last lesson we was covering al-Masdar, which we said in Al-Ajurrūmiyyah is referring to al-Maf'ul al-Muṭlaq, the absolute object. And we mentioned that the absolute object comes for three reasons. One is for type and manner. For example, we have here أخذناهم أخذ عزيز مقتدر. So we seize them with a seizing of a mighty, powerful one. And then we had, it can come for emphasizing another verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions فَدَمَّرْنَاهَا تَدْمِيرًا. So we destroyed them completely. And the third thing it can come for is amount, a number. So for example, فَنَظَرَ نَظْرَةً فِي النُّجُومِ. He cast a look at the stars, meaning one look, نَظْرَةً. Now, Maf'ul Mutlaq has some more rules, which inshallah we want to cover in the coming slide. So the absolute object, Maf'ul Mutlaq, for number of times, bayanu adad. Let's cover some rules in regards to that. So for three-letter root verb, thulathiyun mujarradun. Whenever we have a verb which is triliteral, i.e., it contains three original letters, three root letters, then for adad, for number, it takes the pattern of fa'la. So fa'latun. So for example, if you want to say, I sat once, one will say jalastu jalsatan, so fa'latan pattern, which will mean I sat once. And if somebody wants to say twice, then obviously they bring the musanna form in the state of nasb and the same pattern, fa'la. So they will say jalastu jalsataini, which means I sat twice. And even if they want to say they sat a few times, then they'll just bring the plural form of fa'latan, which will come under the sound feminine plural fa'lat. So jalastu jalsat, which now means I sat a few times. So that's the pattern and the scale to bring maf'ul mutlaq for adad. Now the question now is, how about if we want to bring maf'ul mutlaq for number and amount from those masadir which are not from thulathiyun mujarradun, those verbs which are not three-letter root verbs that contain that are three-letter root verbs, because we can't straightforward put it on the pattern of fa'latan. For example, we have istama'a, ijtanaba. The masdar of these is istama'a yastami'u istima'an, ijtanaba yajtanibu ijtinaban. So we can't put it on the pattern of fa'la. So what do we do in that situation if we want to bring adad? So for non-triliteral verbs, غير ثلاثي مجرد. So verbs which don't contain three root letters. So a verb which does not contain three root letters only, meaning it has other extra letters. So when we're saying ثلاثي مجرد at the top here, we are referring to those verbs that only have the three root letters in the verb and no extra letters. So that's what we mean by غير ثلاثي مجرد. التاء مربوطة is added at the end of the masdar. So to add something taking place once, at the end of the masdar, a ta will be added. So for example, here we have انطلقت انطلاقة, which means now I set off once. انطلق ينطلق انطلاقا means to set off, to depart. Now the masdar of انطلقت is انطلاقا without the ta marbuta. So if we say انطلقت انطلاقا, that would be maf'ul mutlaq for tawkid, for emphasis. So you want to emphasize setting off. However, if one wants to say, I set off once, then we cannot put intilaq on the pattern of fa'latan, because why? It's non-triliteral verb. Intalaqa, it's got three root letters, but it's got extra letters with it. So we cannot directly put it on the pattern of fa'la. So how do we denote wahda, something being one? Well, the simple trick here is you just add a ta marbuta. So intilaqatan, even though originally in the masdar there was no ta. So take for example, if somebody says istama'a, once you use the verb istama'a, and they say I listened attentively once, that'll be istama'tu istima'atan. Normally in the masdar is istima'an. So if you want to just emphasize and say I listened attentively, it'll be istama'tu istima'an. Once the ta comes into the masdar, that makes it now for adad. Bayan adad. Istama'tu istima'atan. Now moving on, how about when the original masdar ends with a ta? So the original masdar already has the ta there. So what do we do then? For example, we have قاتل يقاتل مقاتلة. So we can see that the masdar muqatalatan already has a ta. So how do we denote maf'ul mutlaq for adad? So then a word which is added which indicates singularity. So you can add words like wahidatan or faqat. For example, we have here قاتلته مقاتلة واحدة, which means I fought him once. Now, قاتلته, which means I fought him, مقاتلة, okay, could have been for emphasis, not even for amount. I fought him aggressively. You just want to add that emphasis. So it would have been مقاتلة. But now we want to say once. I fought him once. We can't add a ta because the masdar already has the ta. So what do? We add words that denote singularity, wahda. So words like wahidatan. So qataltuhu muqatalatan wahidatan. The maf'ul mutlaq now here has come for adad. How do we know that? Not because of the ta'un marbuta on the masdar and muqatalatan, because that was already there. It's because of the sifah wahidatan of the maf'ul mutlaq. So in terms of tarkib, muqatalatan would be man'ut, wahidatan would be the na'at, and together you can say becomes the maf'ul mutlaq of qataltuhu. Or you can add words like faqat. So qataltuhu muqatalatan faqat. I fought him once. So the word faqat gives the meaning of that's it. Okay, meaning once, nothing more. So you can add words like la ghayr as well. قاتلته مقاتلة لا غير, nothing more. ليس غير. So anything that denotes once or just a stop, like saying only, then that will give the meaning of wahda, singularity, and that'll be sufficient for the maf'ul mutlaq to denote adad. So just to summarize, from verbs that contain three letters only in the past tense, that's what I mean by three-letter root verb. So jalasa in the past tense is only jim lam sin. Then the pattern for adad is fa'la, and then that will change accordingly if you want to say twice and several times. When you say twice, it'll come on the pattern of muthanna. Several times it can come on the pattern of sound feminine plural, jam'un mu'annathun salimun. And then for non-triliteral verbs, meaning in the past tense, there's three original letters and extra letters. So in talaqa, we got ta, lam, and qaf. But we have extra letters, which is the noon and the alif. So in that situation, in the masdar, you'll add a ta. And then the masadir, those infinitive words or masadir, those root words that already have the ta, then you have to add a sifa of the maf'ul mutlaq, which denotes singularity. Now moving on to the next one, when the maf'ul mutlaq comes for naw', okay, mana. So we want to bring the maf'ul mutlaq for mana. How the verb took place. Okay. Now we should not get confused with hal, because hal don't have the same meaning as the verb mentioned before, and it's not a masdar as well. So that's why you can see there'll be a difference between the bayan al-naw' of maf'ul mutlaq and hal, which normally comes to explain the manner of the file, etc. So here, for naw', manner, maf'ul mutlaq, absolute object coming for manner, for three-letter root verb, i.e., in the past tense, there's only three original letters, no extra letters. It adopts the pattern of fi'latan. For example, we have here, jalastu jilsat al-qari'i. I sat in the manner of a reciter. So jalastu means I sat. Now jilsata is a pattern of fi'lata, which shows the manner of sitting. So I sat in the manner of sitting of a reciter. You can translate this as nakara, because al-qari'i, we're not using the reciter, we're just talking about reciter in general terms. So the al here is not for ta'yin, is not making the word, it's not denoting a specific qari, but it's just talking on a general term. So it'll be like alif lam jinsi. So alif lam jinsi you can translate as a reciter rather than the reciter. So I sat like the sitting of a reciter, or I sat in the manner of a reciter. Where do you get translation of manner? From the word jilsata, which is on the pattern of fi'lata, which comes from no manner. Now the question arises, like the question above, how about if we now have verbs that have three root letters in the past tense but extra letters, we cannot put it on the pattern of fi'lata. So what do we do in that situation? So for non-triliteral verbs, غير ثلاثي مجرد, the form of the masdar remains the same. So we're not changing the masdar of the verb. However, what happens? But its manner is specified using either a qualifying adjective. For example, تقدم الجيش تقدما سريعا. To bring the maf'ul mutlaq for manner, then one can actually bring a sifa of the maf'ul mutlaq, and that will denote that the maf'ul mutlaq here has come for no hay'a. For example, تقدم الجيش تقدما سريعا. The army advanced. تقدم means advanced. Now تقدما سريعا, which means swiftly, and advancing, which was swift. So here we can see that سريعا, an adjective sifa nat has been brought of the maf'ul mutlaq. Now this will now denote that the maf'ul mutlaq here has come for no manner. Or there's another way of describing no manner if you change it into a possessive construct, a next construct, i.e. idafa. So you make the masdar muzaf. So for example here, قاتل الجنود قتال الأبطال. So قاتل means fought, al-junud means the armies, so the armies fought, or the soldiers fought. قتال الأبطال, like the fighting of heroes. So abtal means brave people, courageous people. So the armies fought, or the soldiers fought, like heroes. So now if we look at this, we can see qital is the masdar of qatala. Ba mufa'ala has two masdar forms. One is mufa'alatan and the second is fi'alan. So qatala, yuqatilu, you can say muqatalatan, and you can also say qitalan. So qital we've used here, whereas in the above example we use muqatalatan to demonstrate that rule there. So here we can see by making it mudaf ilayh, qital al-abtali, the maf'ul mutlaq has come for no. So these are some rules, extra rules in regards to maf'ul mutlaq, bringing it for adad or bringing it for no. if we don't see on the pattern of fa'la or fi'la, or we don't see a ta added on to a masdar which normally does not have a ta, or we do not see a sifa mention of the maf'ul mutlaq, most probably it's going to be for tawqeed, just for pure emphasis, like we mentioned in the previous slide. فَدَمَّرْنَاهَا تَدْمِيرًا. Now moving on now, Musannif alayhi rahmah, he's just mentioning now al-maf'ul fih. So let's read through the text of Al-Ajurrūmiyyah. We'll follow this by the translation and a brief explanation. So ظرف الزمان هو اسم الزمان المنصوب بتقدير فيه نحو اليوم والليلة وغدوة وبكرة وسحر وغداء وعتمة وصباح ومساء وأبد وأمد وحين وما أشبه ذلك. So let's get the translation of this. The adverb of time, ظرف الزمان, هو اسم الزمان, it is a noun of time. Al-mansubu, in the accusative case, بتقدير في, with the implication of the preposition fi, which means in, such as al-yawma, which means today, wal-layla, al-layla means tonight, غدوة means early morning, bukra means dawn, saharan means pre-dawn, ghadan means tomorrow, atama means late night, sabahan means morning, masa'an means evening, abadan means forever, and if it's used with negation, it means never. Amadan means a period of time. Hinan means a while. Wama ashbaha dhalika, and similar expressions. That means there are more maf'ul fi adverbs of time. Now the key thing is here, Musannif alayhi rahmah has said that all these dhuruf, adverbs of time, they will actually be mansoob because a fi will be implied before them. Now we know this in Arabic, we've covered in one of our previous lessons. Sometimes a word can be mansoob because a harful jar has been omitted from the text. So for example, we have in the Quran, أَلَا إِنَّ عَادًا كَفَرُوا رَبَّهُمْ. Lo, behold, indeed, Ad, they disbelieved in their Lord. They rejected their Lord. So even there as well, كَفَرُوا بِرَبِّهِمْ, in other words. But the ba harful jar has been omitted in place of the, well, after omitting the ba, the word now, which was supposed to be majroor, will become mansoob because of the omission of the harful jar. That's why it's rabbahum. And you'll see so many examples like this in the Quran. وَاخْتَارَ مُوسَى قَوْمَهُ سَبْعِينَ رَجُلًا لِمِيقَاتِنَا. And Musa alayhi salam selected from his people, but it says قَوْمَهُ, not min qawmihi in the Quran. But why is it mansoob? Because the word qawm had harful jar before it, but it has been omitted, and due to the omission of the harful jar, the word becomes mansoob, qawmahu. That's why in ظرف الزمان, in essence, there's actually a harful jar before the adverb of time that has been removed, and in place of that, now the word will become mansoob because it actually originally had a harful jar before it. So there's, with the implication of the harful jar. So we'll mention examples for all of these, inshallah. One thing to also remember as well, when you see the word al-yawm and al-layla, when it has the al, it means today and tonight. Otherwise, when it's nakira, for example, somebody says yawman or laylan, that means a night or a day. So when it becomes ma'rifah, it means today and tonight. Al-yawma wal-layla. Another just point of benefit, why are the adverbs of time and place called ظرف in the first place? So the adverb ظرف originally is what serves a container for something. Now in the Arabic language, the word ظرف refers to a container, and the plural is ظروف. So ظرف, plural ظروف, it originally is used for containers. Now what's the similarity between a container and these adverbs of time and place. So the vessels are called ظروف, plural of ظرف, because they are containers for what is placed within them. So we can have a container and we could place dates, etc. within them. So that's why the containers are known as ظروف, because they contain things within them. Times and places are also called ظروف. Why? Because actions occur within them. So they become like containers for those actions, or they became like containers for those actions. So ظرف الزمان, ظرف المكان, the container for time and the container for place, literally, why they're known as ظرف? Because they contain the action that occurred within them at that location or at that time. That's why they're known as ظروف. Okay, so that's just a little literal benefit or the relationship or similarity between ظرف and these words which we see like al-yawm, these words, and just normal vessels and containers. Now we're going to go through the words that we've just mentioned in the text. So the first one we had was al-yawm, which means today. For example, someone says sumtul yawma, I fasted today. So notice I said when we have al on the word yawm, it means today. Otherwise, if somebody says sumtu yawman, that will mean I fasted a day. Al-layla means tonight. So for example, somebody says i'takaftu layla, I stayed in seclusion tonight. So here we can see al-laylata is maf'ul fi ظرف zaman and it's mansub with a fatha. And we're actually covering the mansubat. The bigger picture is we are covering the mansubat. That's why we're covering at the moment mafa'il khamsa, the 5 objects. So here we're covering at the moment objects of time. Next we had the word ghudwa, which means early morning. So for example, here we have zurtuka ghudwatan, I visited you early morning. I visited you in the early morning. Now, why we provided examples is because the text of Al-Ajurrūmiyyah is brief, is concise. It's there to memorize as a primer, so one can understand the rules of i'rab and grammar and syntax very easily, and they can bring it onto their tongue. But however, this course, the purpose of this is to bring that text of Al-Ajurrūmiyyah into life and give some practical examples. Next we had was bukra, which means morning. So for example, أذاكر دروسي بكرة, I'm going to study. So ذاكر يذاكر مذاكرة means to study. I'm going to study durusi, my lessons, bukra, tomorrow morning. Okay, so in the morning. Next we had is saharan, which means pre-dawn. Example, استيقظت saharan, I woke up at dawn or pre-dawn. Then we had غدا, which means tomorrow. For example, سأسافر غدا, I will travel tomorrow. So here again, غدا is مفعول في ظرف زمان. عتمة, which means late night. Example, صلينا عتمة, we prayed late at night. So صلينا, we prayed, عتمة, late at night. Example for صباحا, ذهبت إلى العمل صباحا, I went to work in the morning. ذهبت إلى العمل صباحا. So صباحا here is the مفعول في ظرف زمان. مساء, which means evening. So رجعت إلى البيت مساء, I return home in the evening. So مساء here مفعول في ظرف زمان. Then we have the word أبدا, which means never if it's used with negation before it. So here we have لن أكذب أبدا, I will never lie. So أبدا مفعول في ظرف زمان. Then we have أمدا, which means long period. For example, سأجتهد أمدا, I will strive for a long time, a long period. So أمدا here is maf'ul fi Ẓarf Zamān. Then we have حينا, which means while. So example we have here, انتظرتك حينا. I waited for you for a while. So حينا here, which means a while, it's مفعول في ظرف زمان. That's why it's mansoob with a fatha. So these were the adverbs of time. Now moving on to ظرف المكان, adverb of place. So let's read through the text. ظرف المكان هو اسم المكان المنصوب بتقدير في نحو أمام وخلف وقدام ووراء وفوق وتحت وعند ومع وإزاء وحذاء وتلقاء وثم وهنا وما أشبه ذلك. So let's get the translation. The adverb of place, ظرف المكان, هو اسم المكان, is a noun of place. المنصوب بتقدير في, in the accusative case with the implication of the preposition في. Again, why these words are mansoob? Because there is fi implied before these words. So here we have amama, which means in front. Khalfa means behind. Quddama means ahead. Wara'a means at the back. Fawqa means above. Tahta means under. Inda means at. Ma'a means with. Iza'a means opposite. Hidha'a means alongside. Tilqa'a means facing. Thamma means there. And huna means here. وَمَا أَشْبَهَ ذَلِكَ, and similar expressions. So there are more ظروف المكان, adverbs of place, other than these. Now before we move on to an example for each one of these, let's just mention a point of benefit. So we did say that before these adverbs of place, fi is implied. But there is actually an occasion where fi is absolutely necessary to bring. When is that? So it is necessary to use the preposition fi with an adverb of place when the location is limited or confined. For example, jalastu fil masjidi. I sat in the masjid. Now, if you look at the word al-masjid, it is ظرف because it's on the pattern of maf'ilun. So through our Ẓarf Arabic morphology, we will know that when we have a verb and we conjugate it and we put it on the pattern of maf'alun and maf'ilun, depending on the correct way of applying the vowels. In masjid, we will be from sajda yasjudu, nasra yasjudu verbs, it will be maf'ilun. So masjid, place of prostration. How is masjid a ظرف? Because masjid literally means place of prostration. So a masjid is limited, confined, it's restricted to what? 4 walls. Now, because this ظرف here, al-masjid, is restricted, then in these situations, we have to bring the fi. It's necessary, it's wajib. So we can't say jalastul masjida and directly bring the ظرف al-masjida. One will have to bring the fi and the sentence will be jalastu fil masjidi. It'll be incorrect to say jalastul masjida. But however, there's an exception to this rule. If the verb itself expresses entry, so the verb that we are using before the ظرف expresses entry, then both forms are acceptable. You can bring the fi and you can omit the fi. This is when we're saying the ظرف is limited. So, for example, دخلت في المسجد. I entered into the masjid. Literally, that's what it means. So here we can see al-masjid is a ظرف, which for the reasons I've explained before. Before al-masjid, we brought the fee because generally the rule is if the ظرف is محدود, it's restricted, limited and confined, then you have to bring the fee. So that makes sense. دخلت في المسجد. That's going according to the rule. جلست في المسجد. Now, however, because the verb itself denotes entry, in this situation, you can even omit the fee. And we can say, دخلت المسجد, I entered the masjid, directly bringing the ظرف without with the omission of the preposition fee. So that's just a rule you can find in the grammar books as well. So because we are talking about بتقدير fee, is probably a point of benefit and a reminder to bring it at this place. So we did say we're going to mention examples. So أمام, which means in front. So for example, here we have جلس الطالب أمام الأستاذ. The student sat in front. أمام is the مفعول في ظرف مكان. So we can see it's منصوب with a fatha. So in front of the teacher. And majority of these work with إضافة. خلف, behind. So for example, مشيت خلف القائد. I walked, مشيت. خلف القائد, behind the leader. Again, خلف منصوب مفعول فيه ظرف مكان. Adverb of place. قدامه, so we had قدامه here. كان الميدان قدام البيت. The square or the plain كان means was. قدام البيت, in front of the house. Next we have is وراءه, which means behind. So اختبأ الطفل وراء الباب. The child hid. اختبأ يختبئ اختباء means to hide. وراء الباب, behind the door. So we can see وراء here practically used in example is مفعول فيه ظرف مكان. فوق, which means above. So الكتاب فوق المكتب. The book is on top of the desk. So فوق here مفعول فيه ظرف مكان. Then we have تحت. So for example, القطة تحت السيارة. The cat is under the car. So مفعول فيه here, we can see it's worked with what? إضافة as well. Now moving on, we had عند, which means at or with. Example, نلتقي عند المسجد. We will meet at the masjid, at the mosque. So عند here مفعول فيه ظرف مكان. مع, which means with. So الحق مع الصابرين. The truth is with the patient ones. So مع here مفعول فيه ظرف مكان. إزاء, which means opposite. So داري إزاء دارك. My house is opposite. So إزاء means opposite. دارك, your house. حذاء means parallel, in line with. For example, جلست حذاء المنبر. I sat parallel or in line with the pulpit. Okay, minbar, the pulpit. تلقاء, which means towards. So for example, نظر المسافر تلقاء الشمال. The traveler looked towards the north. So تلقاء means towards. It's mansub. It's مفعول فيه ظرف مكان. ثم, which means there. So جلست ثم. I sat there. It's the opposite of هنا. And remember, don't get confused with the word ثم. ثم means then, and ثم means there. So جلست ثم, I sat there. Then we had هنا. So in the example, اجلس هنا, sit here. So we can see هنا here is مفعول في ظرف مكان مبني على السكون. Okay, so it's مبني على السكون because some ظروف are مبني. So ثم will be مفعول في مبني على الفتح, etc. So these were the ظروف المكان, adverbs of place. Now moving on to Al-Ḥāl. This as well is one of the mansubat. It's those words which are in the nasb state. Al-Ḥāl huwa al-ismu al-mansubu al-mufassiru liman bahama min al-hay'at. نحو قولك جاء زيد راكبا وركبت الفرس مسرجا ولقيت عبد الله راكبا وما أشبه ذلك. ولا يكون الحال إلا نكرة ولا يكون إلا بعد تمام الكلام ولا يكون صاحبها إلا معرفة. So let's get the translation of this. The hal, al-halu, is the accusative noun, i.e. a noun which is in the state of nasb. It's one of the mansubat. Al-mufassiru, that explains. Lima in bahama min al-hay'at, what is ambiguous of states. So it comes to explain the manner and the state. And that could be either of the fa'il or maf'ul bihi. And what's the example of al-hal, which is a noun in the state of nasb, and it comes to explain the state? Ja'a Zaydun rakiban. Zayd came riding. So we can see the word rakiban here is explaining the state of Zayd and the manner he came in. He came riding, not walking. So rakiban we can see is mansub as well. The Musannif alayhi rahmah has given another example. So the first example was of fa'il. So ja'a Zaydun rakiban. The hal is explaining the hay'a, the manner of the fa'il. And he's given another example, وَرَكِبْتُ الْفَرَسَ مُسْرَجًا, which is now the hal of the maf'ul bihi. I rode the horse, saddled. So what was the state of the horse? Musrajan, saddled. Because asraja, yusriju, israjan means to saddle. Musraj is the maf'ul bihi, the ismul maf'ul, sorry, the passive participle, which means saddled. So here musrajan is the hal of al-farasa, which is maf'ul bihi. That's why Musannif alayhi rahmah has given two examples. He's given the further example, وَلَقِيتُ عَبْدَ اللَّهِ رَاكِبًا, and I met Abdullah riding. So here again, rakiban is explaining the hal of Abdullah, which is the maf'ul bihi. I met Abdullah riding. So that was the state of Abdullah. It could possibly be the state of the fa'il. I met Abdullah whilst I was riding. Or it could even mean I met Abdullah whilst Abdullah was riding. But if you want to say I met Abdullah and we both were riding, then rakiban would be rakibaini. It'll be dual because it's referring to two entities, and a dual word in the state of nasb ends with the aini sound. So it'll be laqitu Abdullahi rakibaini. وَمَا أَشْبَهَ ذَلِكَ, and similar examples. وَلَا يَكُونُ الْحَالُ إِلَّا نَكِرَةً. The hal is only indefinite. Now there is an exception to this as well. So hal is the circumstance, the word that describes the manner. So rakiban, musrajan, or rakiban again. So hal, it only occurs, sorry, it is only indefinite. It's nakira. So it won't be ma'rifah. There are instances where you will find it ma'rifah and then it will be interpreted as a nakira. For example, u'budullaha wahdahu. Worship Allah alone. So wahdahu we can see is mudaf ilayh. It becomes a ma'rifah word. So it'll be interpreted as wahidan. U'budullaha wahidan. Worship Allah. And what's the hay'a? What's the hal of Allah? Whilst He is alone. Meaning He is one. Him being one. Alone. So وَلَا يَكُونُ إِلَّا بَعْدَ تَمَامِ الْكَلَامِ. And it only occurs. What only occurs? Hal. The circumstance only occurs إِلَّا بَعْدَ تَمَامِ الْكَلَامِ, after the completion of the sentence. Now if we look at this, if we were not to bring the word rakiban here and we were to just say ja'a Zaydun, the sentence is complete. Zayd came. So hal occurs after the sentence has become complete and you're adding extra information, and adverb of circumstance, i.e. hal, to denote the manner of the fa'il or maf'ul bihi. So once the sentence has become complete, you add in the hal. That's why it says it only occurs after the completion of the sentence. So even if you look at the next example as well, Rakibtul farasa, the sentence has become complete here. I rode the horse. The sentence is complete. Now musrajan has now come as something extra and is explaining the manner of the horse whilst it was saddled. So this is what Musannif alayhi rahmah is mentioning, that you will find hal that it comes after the sentence has become complete and it's extra information. وَلَا يَكُونُ صَاحِبُهَا إِلَّا مَعْرِفَةً, and its subject, meaning the subject of the hal, i.e. whom the hal is describing. That's what's known as Sahibul Hal, and in the books it's even known as Dhul Hal. So Dhu al-Hal or Sahibul Hal is the subject, the recipient of the Hal, the state. So in this situation, Zaid was the recipient of the state, the subject of the state. So Zaid will be known as Sahibul Hal. In Rakibtul Farasa, the horse was, which has been described. Its manner has been described. So the word al-faras will be Sahibul Hal, or you can call it Dhul Hal. And its meaning, this is the rule now, وَلَا يَكُونُ صَاحِبُهَا إِلَّا مَعْرِفَةً, and its subject is only definite. I.e. hal will always be nakira. It will always be indefinite. And I did mention as well that if, not the state, the recipient of that state, the subject of that state will always be ma'rifah. And I did mention there's an exception. Sometimes the subject of the state may be nakira. Then there's some rules in regards to that, which inshallah will cover, that if the hal, if the dhul hal, the recipient, sahibul hal, is not ma'rifah, is nakira, then you will have to bring the hal before the sahibul hal, which we'll cover inshallah. So we did say we want to mention some rules in regards to this as well, to open up the text of Al-Ajurrūmiyyah. So the hal circumstantial phrase can come in a few forms. So here we've just seen it as one word, rakiban, musrajan, and rakiban. However, hal can come even as a sentence. It can even come as a masdar. So that's what we want to cover now. So hal can come as a single word. So another example to the above. An added example, وَآتَيْنَاهُ الْحُكْمَ صَبِيًّا, and we granted him wisdom when a child. So here, وَآتَيْنَاهُ, and we granted. آتَى يُؤْتِي إِيتَاءً. This is from Bab Ifan, not from أَتَى يَأْتِي. آتَى يُؤْتِي إِيتَاءً, which means to grant. And we granted him al-hukma, wisdom. And what's the state of the dhamir mansub? Sabiyan, when he was a child, whilst he was a child. So we can see here Sabiyan is the hal, and where's the sahibul hal? The dhul hal is the maf'ul bihi in ataynahu, the who. So it's come as the hal here, we're concentrating on the word the hal here, it's come as a single word. Now sometimes it can come even as a jumla ismiya, a nominal sentence. For example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لا تقربوا الصلاة وأنتم سكارى. Do not go near prayer. The waw here is circumstantial. Whilst أنتم سكارى, you are intoxicated. So here, the hal is not one word. It's actually the jumla ismiya, أنتم سكارى. So أنتم is مبتدأ, سكارى is khabar, and that becomes jumla ismiya. And the jumla ismiya will become the hal of the fa'il in la taqrabu, which is the wawul jama'ah, dhamirul jama'ah, which will become the sahibul hal or dhul hal, the subject of the circumstance. It can also come as a verbal sentence, i.e. a jumla fi'liya. For example, وَجَاءُوا أَبَاهُمْ عِشَاءً يَبْكُونَ. They came to their father, meaning Yusuf al-Islam's brothers, they came to their father Isha'an at night, And what was the circumstance? Yabkun, crying. They came crying to their father at night. So we can see here yabkun. Yes, it seems like it's one word, but there's actually two words. Yabkun, the fi'l mudari, and the fa'il, which is the waw, that will become jumla fi'liya, and that will become the hal of the fa'il in ja'u, which means they came. So the fa'il, the waw al-jama'a, is sahibul hal, or you could say dhul hal, and the hal is yabkun. Now, one thing to note here, we said وَلَا يَكُونُ الْحَالُ إِلَّا نَكِرَةً. Hal is always nakira, indefinite. We can see صَبِيًّا is indefinite. Haba in antum sukara and yabkun. How is that indefinite? Well, simple trick. Jumla is always considered to be nakiratun. Jumla equals or is equated to nakira as being indefinite. So antum sukara jumla ismiya, yabkun jumla fi'liya, that will be in the hukm and the same ruling and bracket as nakira, as an indefinite word. So this is how the sentences can fit the criteria of being hal when we say the hal is always nakira. Another form of hal is as a masdar, verbal noun or infinitive word. ثُمَّ إِنِّي دَعَوْتُهُمْ جِهَارًا. Nuh alayhi salam said, then I called them, دَعَوْتُهُمْ جِهَارًا, aloud. Now look at the word jiharan, is actually masdar from bab mufa'ala. Jahara, yujahiru, mujaharatan. And another masdar is jiharan. So in other words, here the jiharan is hal of the finding da'utu, the dhamir, to. Meaning I called them whilst I was, calling them out loud, aloud, publicly. I.e. jiharan will be interpreted as mujahiran. So even when it comes on a sentence level, yabkun will be interpreted as what? Bakina. And wa antum sukara hala kawnikum sukara. That will be interpreted. So jiharan is actually a masdar from bab mufa'ala. So if we interpret this as a hal, as a nakira word in the normal state, it would be mujahiran. The ismul fa'il from jahara yujahiru mujahara, then wajiharan. So here the hal has come in the form of a masdar. We should not get confused that this is maf'ul mutlaq. Why? Because jiharan is not in the same meaning as da'utu. Okay, jiharan is considered to be hal because it don't have the same meaning as da'utu. Da'utu means to invite or to call, and jiharan means to announce publicly, aloud. So here jiharan will be considered to be hal, not maf'ul mutlaq. Sometimes we see that there's actually both possibilities. If the verb and the maf'ul mutlaq have a similar meaning, then in that situation, when the hal comes as masdar form, then there's two possibilities. For example, we have فَأَوْجَسَ فِي نَفْسِهِ خِيفَةً مُوسَى. So Musa alayhi salam sensed within himself fearing. So it could be khaifan or it could be khifatan, in the same meaning as awjasa being maf'ul mutlaq. Okay, so there can be two possibilities in that situation when we see that there's a masdar and either it's in the same meaning as the verb mentioned before, but it's different in terms of root letters. Okay, some may say it's hal, and it'll be actually hal mu'akkida. It's reinforcing the meaning of the verb, or some just say that is a possibility it can be maf'ul mutlaq. So these are examples you might come across in the Quran. Now, one thing to understand, if the subject of the state, dhul hal, is an indefinite noun, which we mentioned before, the hal, sahibul hal, is always ma'rifah. وَلَا يَكُونُ صَاحِبُهَا إِلَّا مَعْرِفَةً. Okay, sometimes it can be indefinite. If it's indefinite, it is obligatory to place the state hal before it. So for example, جاءني راكبا رجل. A man came to me riding. Now, if we look at the word rajul, a man, that is the sahibul hal. That's the recipient of the circumstance. Dhul hal or sahibul hal. Rakiban is the hal. Normally, the hal comes after. The subject of the hal comes before. However, if it's nakira, then you will have to advance the hal before the dhul hal. It will become wajib. For example, جاءني راكبا رجل. A man came to me riding. Why this rule? So that is not confused with an adjective sifa in the accusative state, as in your saying, رأيت رجلا راكبا. So in the nasb state, it can become confusing. For example, رأيت رجلا راكبا, I saw a man riding. So here, رأيت رجلا, you got رأيت, which is فعل and fa'il. رجلا is man'ut and راكبا is the na'at. And the man'ut na'at becomes the maf'ul bihi of رأيت. That's what I saw. But how about if somebody says, I saw a man whilst riding? Then what would you do? Because if you bring the same sentence structure, then it can get confused with Mawsuf Sifa. But you want to denote Hal. So in that situation, Rakiban will come before the Dhul Hal, the Sahibul Hal, and one will be compelled to say, Ra'aytu Rakiban Rajulan. I saw a man whilst riding. Okay? Whereas Ra'aytu Rajul Rakibul mean I saw a man who was riding. Okay, so I saw a man riding, or who was riding probably will be better because it gives the meaning of the Mawsuf Sifa. So these are some rules. There's so many other rules you can find in the grammar books, but I think just to explain the text, and that's relevant to the text of Al-Ajurrūmiyyah, those are the rules that we bring into life in this course as well. And by the way, those who enroll in the course and complete it, they will get inshallah, our latest publication of Al-Ajurrūmiyyah with all the footnotes, everything that we've covered in this course as well. So all the, alhamdulillah, you'll receive the first publication of Al-Ajurrūmiyyah with all the summaries and notes as well. التمييز هو الاسم المنسوب المفسر لما انبهم من الذوات، نحو قولك تصبب زيد عرقا وتفقأ بكر شحما وطاب محمد نفسا واشتريت 20 غلاما وملكت 90 نعجة وزيد أكرم منك أبا وأجمل منك وجها ولا يكون إلا نكرة ولا يكون إلا بعد تمام الكلام. Let's get the translation. التمييز. What is التمييز? هو الاسم المنسوب. It is the accusative noun, the noun in the state of nasb, that clarifies. Important word here. The previous word, okay, is for hal was something similar. Al-mufassiru lima inbahama min al-dhawat clarifies that which is ambiguous of entities or essences. The difference between at-tamyiz and hal is hal clarified, cleared up things which were ambiguous in terms of the manner of something. But here, tamyiz clears up and clarifies that which is ambiguous of entities. So for example, here we have tasabbaba Zaydun araqan, such as Zayd dripped. Now tasabbaba means to drip. Okay? Zayd dripped. Zayd dripped in what? In what sense was Zayd dripping? Araqan, in sweat. So we can see that the ambiguity is from the entity, not the mannerism. Not in terms of the manner and the circumstance and state. وَتَفَقَّأَ بَكْرٌ شَحْمًا, and Bakr burst. How did Bakr burst and what was he exploding with? Shahman, fat. I.e., he was bulky and he had a lot of, body mass, fat, etc. So Bakr was bursting with fat. Well, these are the examples used in Al-Ajurrūmiyyah. Could have probably been a bit, it could have been different examples, but these are the examples used. وَطَابَ مُحَمَّدٌ نَفْسًا, and Muhammad was good. How was Muhammad good? Okay, nafsan, in spirit. So we can see that these words, araqan, Zayd was dripping, it's not explaining the manner of Zayd. It's explaining that which is ambiguous of the entity itself. What was Zayd dripping in? Araqan, sweat. What was Bakr bursting in? Shahman, fat. What was Muhammad good in? Nafsan, in spirit. واشتريت 20 غلاما. I purchased 20 slaves. So if we stop at 20, so these are entities, these are items. I purchased 20. Now there's ambiguity. 20 what? غلاما, slaves. So this is where these kind of examples, when it comes to numbers, it kind of brings about more of the definition. Al-mufassiru lima in bahama min al-zawat. Because when you stop on 20, from these items, these 20 entities, there's a doubt. 20 what? غلاما, slaves. وملكت 90 نعجة. I owned 20 sheep. Okay, so وملكت 90 نعجة. If you stop on the word 20, okay, this will sorry, not 20, 90. Okay, if you stop on the word 90, this will leave about some kind of ambiguity. Okay, so okay, so وملكت 90 نعجة. I think this one, the translations are wrong. So I owned 90 ewes. Okay, sheep. وزيد أكرم منك أبا, and Zayd is more generous than you. Aban, how's he more generous? As a father. As a father. وأجمل منك وجها, and more handsome than you in countenance and face, complexion. So we can see that even in the word Zaydun akramu minka, Zayd is more generous than you, there's some kind of ambiguity that remains. In what sense is Zayd more generous than you? Aban, as a father. And even if you stop on wa ajmalu minka, is more handsome than you. Okay? In what aspect? Wajhan. ولا يكون إلا نكرة, and tamyiz is only indefinite. Same thing as hal. ولا يكون, that's why we see عرقا, شحما, نفسا, غلاما, نعجة, أبا, وجها. These are all indefinite. ولا يكون إلا بعد تمام الكلام, and it only comes after the completion of the sentence. So that means, just as the way we mentioned in hal, that the sentence is complete, and then after that we have additional information that comes to clarify things. So it's a distinct noun. So even if you look at this, تصبب زيد, Zayd was dripping. Complete sentence, fail fine. تفقأ بكر, Bakr was bursting. طاب محمد, Muhammad was fine. Okay, so the sentence is complete, and then after that we will see that the information that we provide is it's extra, and it comes to remove ambiguity. That's why it's known as At-Tamyīz. Now, the ambiguous entities can appear in the following ways, just as the way we mentioned that hal can have several forms. So from these examples, we can actually derive the following. The tamyiz can come in the following ways. Adadun sarihun, an explicit number. So remember we said 20 غلاما. So for example here, اشتريت 11 كتابا. I bought 11 books. Okay, so if you can see here, kitaban, the ambiguous entity, okay, meaning we're talking about not the tamyiz itself, we're talking about the ambiguous word from which the ambiguity stems out from. So the ambiguous entities can appear in the following ways. So either it's a number, so for example, ahada ashara, it's a number, and then the distinct noun the tamyiz comes to remove the ambiguity from that entity. So the ambiguous entity can either be an explicit number. So for example, I purchased 11. 11 what? So the tamyiz here, kitab, comes to remove the doubt, books. It could be adadun ghayr sarih, an implicit number, as in kam kitaban indaka. How many books do you have? So if you look at the word kam, it means how many. Still denoting a number, but it's ambiguous. But how many what? So kitaban, which is the tamyiz, comes to remove that doubt, which stems out from kam. And by the way, the word that removes the doubt, which is kitaban in these two examples, and araqan, shahman, nafsan, etc., that is known as tamyiz, and it's also known as mumayyiz, with a kasra under the ya. And the word from which the ambiguity stems out from is known as mumayyaz, with a fatha on the ya. So here, the mumayyaz is kam, and the tamyiz is kitab. So the ambiguous entity is a number which is implicit, it's not clear, because when you say kam, it means how many, which is not a direct number or clear number. Was, so weight, so we can see tamyiz can come after weight. So indi kilu inaban, I have a kilogram of grapes. So here we can see that the mumayyaz, the ambiguous entity, is a form of weight, which is kilogram, kilo. And the tamyiz inaban has come to remove that doubt, kilo of what? Grapes. So sometimes tamyiz can come after weight. What else does it come after? Kail, which means dry measure. So when you have vessels, etc., containers that you measure, things which are dry, like dates, grains, etc. So it can come after that. So أعطينا الفقير, we gave the poor. صاعا, which is the dry measure. A sa of what? قمحا, which means wheat. So it's come after dry measure. صاعا. So if we stop there and we said we gave the faqir a sa', which is obviously a container, a vessel, and it's used for dry measure, to measure things which are dry. So if we stop there, a sa' of what? That could be of wheat, it could be of grains, it could be of dates, it could be raisins. Sa' of what? Qamhan, wheat. So the word qamhan would be tamyiz, sa'an would be mumayyaz. So it's come after dry measure. It can come even after distance as well. Okay? So here we have safartu milan. So safartu means I traveled. Yeah, so traveling now, you travel a distance. Okay? So here we would say milan has come to remove the doubt from a distance. Because when somebody travels, he's traveling in a certain, kilometers or miles, etc. So milan has come to remove the doubt, and the distance stems out from the verb safartu, which denotes traveling. Then we have miqyas, measure, so something which you can give an estimate. So for example, عندي ذراع, I have a cubit. I have a cubit. Okay, a cubit of what? Hariran. Hariran means silk. So I have a cubit of silk. So the word dhira, which means a forearm length, a cubit, if we stop there, there remains doubt. And then the word hariran comes to remove that doubt. So that's why we would say that hariran is tamyiz. Hariran is tamyiz. Okay. Now, next one we have is shibhul miqdar, resembled measure. So you're not saying, an accurate measure, but you're kind of giving some kind of estimation about the measure. So في السماء قدر راحة سحابا. In the sky is a palm's measure of clouds. So في السماء means in the sky. قدر راحة means equal to. راحة here means a palm. So equal to the measure of a palm. Qadr means a measure of. راحة means palm. So in the sky there's measure of a palm of what? Sahaban, clouds. So qadr راحة is the ambiguous entity, is mumayyaz, and sahaban has come to remove that ambiguity. It can also come after nisba, attribution of the fa'il and the fa'il. So the attribution of the verb to the subject. So here is there the talibu, the student increased. So the attribution of increasing to the word al-talib, nisba, the ambiguity stems out from the nisbah, the actual sentence, i.e. attributing the musnad to the musnad ilayh. So if we stop there and we said the student increased, in what manner did he increase? Ilman, knowledge. So that's another example. So just to run down the ambiguous entities, adadun sarihun, a clear number, so ahad ashara, kitab has come to remove the doubt. Adadun ghayr sarih, an implicit number, so kam kitaban, kam means how many, kitaban, the tamyiz has come after an implicit number which is kam, and that will be known as mumayyaz, and kitaban will be known as tamyiz. After was weight, so indi kilu inaban, I have a kilo of what? Grapes. Kail, which means dry measure, so we said that sa', I gave the poor person a sa', a form of measure of what? Qamhan, wheat. Misaha, which means distance, so safartu, I traveled, so now it denotes some kind of distance. When you say traveling, milan comes to remove that doubt. Miqyas means measure, so indi zira'un, I have a cubit of what? Hariran, silk. So hariran will be the tamyiz. Shibul miqdar, where we give an estimation. So in the sky there is a measure of a palm's measure of what? Cloud. Nisba, when you attribute the musnad to the musnad ilayh, there can remain some kind of ambiguity, and then the tamyiz comes to remove that ambiguity. So is there the talibu, the student increase, in what aspect? In knowledge. So inshallah, next lesson we will continue from here, and if there are any questions, you can still use the Telegram support group, get your questions across. Inshallah, would be more than willing to help and support you in your journey. Just to reiterate, if somebody is still interested in the course, they can enroll, and inshallah, once the whole course is completed, and inshallah, with the certificate will be granted, one will receive a free copy of Al-Ajurrūmiyyah